So today we're going to take a look at the Oppo Reno 2 versus the Samsung S10e. The Oppo does have 4 cameras on the back, whereas on the Samsung it's only 2. For price, the Oppo Reno 2 is cheaper, so let's see if that camera quality is better than the Samsung's. So this is the low light test of the front-facing camera, and one thing to mention is that the Samsung S10e can shoot up to 4K with the front-facing camera, while the Oppo is up to 1080. And I would say the Samsung has one of the best video quality in terms of Android phones, so let's see if Oppo can actually beat it.
For portrait mode, how you take the pictures and how the background blur looks are really similar to each other. The biggest difference to me is the colors. I do like the Samsung colors a bit more just because it looks closer to the eye, whereas on the Oppo it favors more towards the greenish hue. On the Samsung S10e, you can see more of the warmer skin tones, which looks more natural, and the biggest dead giveaway is the color of my jacket. On the Samsung, you can tell that it's more of the deeper blue, which is exactly how that color should look like, whereas on the Oppo Reno 2, my jacket looks more like the turquoise color, which is far off. And more points towards the Samsung with the more special effects or fun effects, which is okay. I don't think a lot of people will use it, but the best one for me is the color pop. Even in low light situations, that's where I feel like the bigger push for the greenish hue comes out for the Oppo, whereas the Samsung will stay more saturated and punchy, so I feel like a lot more people would prefer that color out of the Samsung than the Oppo Reno 2. And also the blacks on the Samsung is more harsh, so that kind of makes it or helps it be more contrasty and pop out more. The Reno 2 does have macro mode, so if you do like shooting that type of way, then that is a huge plus. Now for everyday use, if you don't use a telephoto lens at all, then the Samsung would be more than enough for you. And if you do happen to need to zoom, then the Samsung does okay, but of course it's not going to be as clear or sharp as the Oppo Reno 2. For HDR, it seems like the Oppo does a better job since I can see more in the shadows. And the Samsung does have the wider field of view on the ultra wide angle lens, so a lot of times I do find myself seeing my finger in the shot. For the camera UI, both are really basic and beginner friendly, but I would say the Samsung S10e is easier to use. On the Reno 2, I can swipe to get to my modes, but I would have to hit another button to get to my night mode or expert mode, so it's one more step. Whereas on the Samsung, all my modes I can swipe to and I can customize it, so if I don't use pro mode or time-lapse, I can take it off my list. For low light, the colors are still more realistic or closer to the eye on the Samsung because in this alleyway, the light is yellow and how I would see it is yellow. Whereas on the Oppo is trying to white balance it to the max, and some people would prefer that way, but what I'm saying is what I'm seeing in real life is exactly how the Samsung is showing it. In really dark areas, the Samsung does look darker overall, but I would prefer that way because on the Oppo, it looks like it's trying to increase the shadows, which makes the overall picture looks faded or even blurry at times. Both of these phones do have their own dedicated night mode and they both work really good, except for the ultra wide mode on the Oppo Reno 2, because when there's no light at all, you're not going to see any difference between regular mode and night mode for ultra wide lens. So I would say the Samsung does have the upper hand on that. Now moving on to video, they both have their own bokeh mode or bokeh effect into their video, which is cool, but I still would say it's not going to be an actual camera. For stabilization test, I would say the Samsung is a bit better because I can see the micro jitters while walking every time I take a hard step. And for the main lens, the colors on the Oppo seems too green, whereas on the Samsung, the red bricks are actually red. And when we switch to the ultra wide angle lens, the colors on the Oppo seems to be much better, whereas on the Samsung, it seems too oversaturated. Like the red building across the street, the bricks on that seems to be too red, and the blue sky and the reflection out of the windows seems to be too blue as well. And for the stabilization, I think it does better on the Oppo than the ultra wide angle lens on the Samsung, because I can see a lot of my up and down movements on the Samsung, whereas on the Oppo Reno 2, it kind of looks like I'm on a gimbal. Both of these phones also have their own ultra steady mode, which makes it really steady while I'm walking. Now for me, I think I'm going to go with the Oppo just because I can see less micro jitters and it kind of look a little bit, just a little bit more stable. Now for low light, we can see a lot more micro jitters, but for me, I think the Samsung wins just because there's less micro jitters. And for the flares, the Samsung does have it more controlled, whereas you can see a lot more streaks going on the Oppo Reno 2. The Samsung S10e also has 4K 60, which the Oppo Reno 2 does not have. And speaking of resolution, it kind of sucks every time I go to ultra wide angle mode on the Oppo, it turns to 1080. It doesn't do 4K on ultra wide angle, and if I want to switch back to 4K 30, it has to be manual. I have to go back all the time. I have to hit settings and go back to it, so it's kind of annoying as well. So that is my comparison between these two phones. I would say the Samsung does offer the better overall experience and package, if you don't use the telephoto lens. But if you do use it a lot, then the Oppo Reno 2 does make a good choice, especially for the price. So if you are interested in any of these phones, I do have links down below. Please subscribe, like, and follow me on Instagram if you haven't yet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.